Wednesday, December 10th. Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritsa Giorgio. Today, we are going to have former Ambassador Susan Rice, who has worn literally every hat in Washington, I think. She served as the director of the U.S. Domestic Policy Council. She was the ambassador to the United Nations, national security advisor for former President Obama. She can talk about literally anything we want to talk to her about, I think. So she is coming on the show. We're so pleased to have her join us here in about 15 minutes.
And I think she's one of those smart people. I think she's a Rhodes Scholar, too.
She is. Yeah, she's one of those smart people. Absolutely. That's the perfect way to say it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's good. And she's
Uh,
worn every hat in Washington, D.C. except this one. Okay, so you
the
know
one you're wearing?
where I'm wearing. Yeah, because I'm the only one that's worn this hat besides whoever gave me this hat.
Well, we'll get to the hat at the
We will
end.
get
So, sorry, you know me and my technology. It's just a
well,
two-person team here, so we're working through it.
it's early in the morning if you're on the West Coast, but you're not on the West Coast. So
I'm not. I'm on the East Coast. There's a lot to get to. We have a lot of very important news we want to talk about happening in the world, but I I had a hunch that Senator John Tester might want to talk about something else first. But if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to.
no, I absolutely want to talk about it. So she's Maritsa is doing a little hitch as the anchor for Scripps. And, day before yesterday, it just seems like it's been longer ago than that, but it hasn't. She did a little interview with the bass player for Kiss, a guy by the name of Gene Simmons, and, it was a very, very interesting interview from my perspective. I mean, I thought I got, my wife and I and other people that were watching it got a big kick out of, how Gene Simmons, yeah. Well, I mean, let's just put it this way. If you haven't seen it, there's, probably go to some just type in Simmons Maritza scripts, and it'll probably come up.
Well, so
I don't know that I say that it's worth the watch. Nothing else to do. I mean, what the hell, you know?
so we had him on Scripps to talk about this bill, this American Music Fairness Act that he was on the Hill yesterday, kind of championing. And we wanted to talk to him, but the night before he was honored at the Kennedy Center Awards. And so, I pivoted a little bit after talking about this bill because he had been critical in the past of President Trump. And I don't think it's a secret when you're critical of President Trump, he usually doesn't take it very well. He usually goes after you. I mean, look what he's doing to Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I asked him about that and he got snippy with me a little bit, like, "You're not gonna get me on this clickbait," and he
Yeah,
kind of went he said, "Who
I'm
are you?" And he said, "Never you just shut your pie hole." It
right.
was just a funny, exchange, and I was, ready to say, "Okay, well, thanks for joining us," and then he just threw out this thing. Well, I did not expect that I would ever be on TMZ, but I'll put this up. TMZ put out this yesterday because at the very end of the interview, he asked me this question that honestly took me off guard. I thought I misheard him. He said, "Are you still modeling?" I said, "What?" And it just went off the rails. So I was not expecting to be featured on any entertainment websites yesterday and today, but here we are.
There you go. Yeah, did they take that picture from the interview, by the way?
No,
Oh,
that picture is like from that picture is from a selfie I took with my former co-anchor in DC a few months ago on the street. I have a backpack on, like, it wasn't I don't know why they chose that picture.
that's because you look like you were modeling, I guess, maybe.
Oh,
I don't
stop it. Yes, the grief that I'm getting from John Tester now on a daily basis, folks. Like, I have given him so much shit over the years that now it's payback time, right?
well, I've been taught well by the people I grew up with, you know? Every time you screwed up, they acknowledged it for years and years, later in your life, so
Said
I'm not saying you screwed up, you did everything right, I mean, how do you ebb and flow with this dude? But, you did a good job, I will admit that, but I
thank you.
wasn't aware of your modeling career, but now I am.
Now you know.
Talk about it.
Um, okay, let's get to
There's more important stuff to talk about than your modeling that
my
doesn't
fake modeling career. Let's get to some real headlines. Okay. So, last night, this is all over the news this morning. The president went to Pennsylvania, right, for a speech. It was supposed to be focused on affordability. It was supposed to ease concerns about, you know, the rising costs that we are all seeing as Americans. It's not quite how things went down because it turned into him actually mocking the subject of affordability. He said Americans are doing better than ever before. He went on another one of those tangents about, you don't need $37 for your daughter. You should buy fewer pencils because dolls and pencils are what people are worried about buying, I think, apparently, according to the president. And then he went down tangents on immigration. He attacked Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota again. He falsely claimed that Venezuela's entire prison population was dumped into our country, and he said that inflation is stopped. It's just stopped.
Yeah, so you want me to comment, I will. I will tell you that,
What we
it is
I don't
it
know.
it has always intrigued me that a millionaire from New York City could get the support of many hardworking Americans, and he has. But this is one of the reasons why. I don't know that President Trump has ever been in a grocery store in his adult life. I don't know that he's ever worried about health insurance premiums. I don't know that he's ever actually went out, I would say, buy combine parts, but I know for damn well sure he's never done that. But the truth is that if you've gone to a store, a grocery store, for example, or a hardware store, or any of these things, you've seen the impacts that these tariffs have had. And he obviously has not, will not, and would rather just stand out there and live in an alternate universe. Because the truth is, he can deny it's happening and he can say the economy is A plus 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 plus. But the bottom line is we got big challenges out there, and this inflation stuff that was happening in the previous administration that the president said he was going to fix hasn't been fixed at all. In fact, I think it's gotten worse, much worse. So we'll see moving forward. But the truth is, I think this is a prime example why it's important not to have people who are totally out of the loop when it comes to what normal people are going through in this country we live in today.
And the other thing is, I mean, we're seeing that, behind the scenes, White House staff says, "Hey, you got to stop. Like, we need to actually talk about this in a real way," which is exactly what President Biden was so criticized for, not, fully acknowledging the rising cost of living in America, not fully acknowledging inflation. And a lot of people were really critical of President Biden. And, he even said last night, President Trump said, they don't want him to talk about this other stuff, but here he goes. So
And it also not kind of, it absolutely is starting to show the president's age. I mean, the fact is that if you're in this position, you can deny, 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 but at some point you have to realize that you're not working with the same deck of cards that everybody else is.
well, he is 79. He is 79. Okay, so last night in Miami,
79, 79 isn't necessarily that old. Okay, so give me a break.
I'm
Uh,
not saying that, but it
but
is.
but the truth is that some of his cognitive ability is obviously slipping away. There's just no doubt about that.
Well, and the schedule and the demands, as you know, Senator, when
Yeah,
you work in this town as an elected official, it is a lot different than the demands of somebody like me
100%,
or anyone else.
100%. No, well, maybe
Um,
not you, but other people, yes, 100%, 100%.
yeah, that's right, that's right. In Miami last night, a Democrat won the mayoral race for the first time in almost 3 decades. Um, Eileen Higgins won 59% of the vote, an 18-point margin against her opponent, and this is supposed to be nonpartisan, this race, but, do we have that anymore anywhere? Yeah, so Miami, another litmus test here for what we're going to see next year. What do you think?
Well, what I think is that Susan Wiles, the chief of staff of the president, went on TV here a few days ago and said, "We're gonna put the president on the road because when he's on the ballot, more people turn out." She's right. That's correct. That's a correct assessment. But the problem is what the president has done for the last year is not gonna get people to turn out to vote for his side of the aisle. And Congress has been absent. They've been AWOL. We've talked about that many times on this podcast. So they are part of the problem. And so when you have a situation where people are given a choice and they say, "Do we like the country where the direction the country is going in right now?" It's just not like kinda we don't like it. No, we don't like it a lot. And some of these people are people who voted for Trump. And they're finally saying, this ain't working out so good. And might I add, and I've said this many times on this podcast too, I want President Trump to be successful. I live in this country too. But the truth
Right.
is, the stuff that he has done has not been positive for the middle class, for small businesses, for family farm and ranch agriculture, for our national defense. All of that stuff is just not heading in the right direction. And so you end up for the first time in more times than I have fingers on my left hand, 3 decades, a person winning that typically would not win that race. But because of the policies, I believe because of the policies, people are saying, we don't like what's going on. So I think Susie Wiles, even though I think she's truthful in what she says, I think it may well work against folks coming out. And I think that there's going to be a lot of Republicans that are going to be on the ballot in 2025, 2026, unless things change. They will say, find another state to go to because we just don't want to bring
Mm.
revolve around you. I know that because, quite frankly, I've been faced with those kind of decisions where people have wanted to come to the state, and I've just said, "No, you know what? I don't want to carry your baggage. I'll carry my own baggage and my own positives. I don't need yours too." And I
And
think
you've
there's
made
a
the
lot of
headlines for that.
there's a lot of baggage. Yeah, I did, and there's a lot of baggage around President Trump. And I don't think things are going to change in the next year because I don't think President Trump's capable of changing.
Apologies to Suzette. She's in the chat saying, "I'm 79, and I always feel a bit weird when people refer to it as old and failing." Suzette, I am not
See,
saying 79 is old.
see,
I am not saying 79 is old, but 79 is old if you're about to go crisscross the country and try to get people to vote for you, right?
yeah, it also depends on what you do for a living. I'm gonna tell you, if you ran a jackhammer your whole life, your body's in different physical shape than somebody who, sat in an office. So, and 79 isn't old. I agree
It's
with
not old.
everybody. You know what they say, if you're 69, 79 isn't old. I'm 69, so
And you're
79.
right. Yes, my apologies, Suzette. I wasn't trying to say that, but we do
That's right.
I think that it is fair, and Sam Stern brings up a good point that, there was so much emphasis put on Biden's age and, um, cognitive abilities, and it should be a fair playing field. Okay, tomorrow, your former colleagues in the Senate expected to vote on extending the ACA subsidies. This was part of that whole compromise to reopen the government after the longest
Yep.
federal government shutdown. Promised a vote, not promised support on this measure. I- if something isn't done in a few short weeks, health insurance premiums will go up dramatically for the millions of people on the ACA, which will trickle down to the rest of us, higher for all of us. It's already started. We're also now hearing about a new vote, though, on a different plan, a GOP plan, a new Republican plan, which would actually just do away with those tax credits and instead put money into health savings accounts for people, but only if they purchase certain plans. Neither measure here is expected to pass.
So here's the problem, Maritza. I mean, I was there when the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, was passed. It wasn't perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than what we had. The Republicans, for the last 15 years, because I think it's been nearly 15 years since Obamacare was passed, have been trying to trash it, get rid of it. And quite frankly, when it was first established, and I think you can say the same thing today, it worked. Was it as good as it should be? No, but it was a hell of a lot better than not having anything. And the Republicans have tried to repeal it. They've tried to repeal it. They've tried to repeal it more times than I can count, and that's a fact. And now they're saying, "Well, we're just not gonna do subsidies." Come on, guys, what the hell are you thinking about? Unless you've got a plan, and you haven't been able to develop a plan for 15 years, unless you got a plan to replace Obamacare, and I got news for you, if you got one that really does work, everybody will vote for it. Everybody will vote for it, but you don't, and that's the problem. And the reason they're doing this side by side vote tomorrow is for cover and say, "See, we had a plan, even though the damn plan doesn't work." A lot of these, I have been told that a lot of the premiums are going up double. So how much
Double.
money are you gonna put in this? Say you're gonna give people $2,000, $3,000. Some of these plans are going from less than $1,000 to well over $1,000.
But
You're
here's the
gonna have to
deal.
put a lot of money into these. And by the way, where's that money coming from? We're just gonna pile it on the kids for debt. So
Here's the deal, though. He's talking about health savings accounts. that doesn't cover insurance, that covers your costs at the doctor's office or your prescriptions, that doesn't cover actual insurance.
I was making the assumption that they were gonna change it so it did cover insurance, and
Oh,
I haven't read the
well,
bill,
I
so
don't
I
know.
don't know. But the bottom line is these subsidies are gonna have to be through the damn roof because insurance rates were going through the roof for some of the folks out there. And I just think that, this side by side is just cover to say, "See, we had this, the Democrats stopped us," instead of giving us a damn plan, put the subsidies in, come up with a plan that works for people, that actually lowers rates, not this stuff that we're, "Oh, my plan is I'm gonna have you pay less and you're gonna have better insurance." Well, that's a great plan. Where the hell is it? And I've never seen it. And this is part of the problem where people get elected as mayor after 3 decades because Republicans are AWOL. The president has told these guys, "We don't wanna vote for these subsidies, so don't vote for these subsidies," and it's gonna kill them at the polls. It's gonna kill them at the polls. Because when rates go up, those are rates that you cannot afford to be without insurance in this country, and people are not gonna be able to afford insurance. You're gonna see more bankruptcies, you're gonna see more people driven into poverty because of stupid damn things that Congress is doing. Congress needs to wake up and be the Article 1 body that the Constitution has told them to be.
I think you got through that without a F word.
Fucking A right. Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry, folks. I had to taunt him. Do you remember I wanna ask you, I never asked you this. I mean, I remember the first, Trump administration, we saw that famous McCain vote, right? When he surprised everyone, he walked down on the floor and he did the thumbs down and this is saved the ACA. Do you remember that moment?
I remember that moment very, very well because we didn't know what Senator McCain was gonna do, but in the end, Senator McCain said to himself, just like Tom Tillis did on the big beautiful bill, and others have stood out, "Is this good for people of Arizona or is it not?" And he made the decision that it was not. And unless you have a plan, this is gonna continue to happen. You combine this with the big, beautiful bullshit bill that was passed back in July, and it puts healthcare on its heels. And you combine that with the fact that we're driving research out of this country at rates that we've never ever seen before. We're taking university units and neutering them. I mean, the list goes on and on and on with what's going on with healthcare in this country right now. And this is just another one. And it drives me crazy that the Republicans think they're going to get cover on this vote tomorrow by putting a side by side up on a bill that is only half baked.
What do you remember how you reacted when he did that, when he walked up and did the thumbs down? Like, do you remember that
You know, I was
specific moment?
it was incredibly gutsy. Let's just put it that way. It was amazing. I mean, look, John Cain and everybody has a love-hate relationship with John McCain when he was in the Senate. You know, uh, Jack Reed once told me John's not happy unless he's fighting with everybody. The truth is John McCain was somebody who believed in democracy, who fought for this country, who actually ended up in a prisoner of war camp and experienced things no human being should ever have to experience. I got in plenty of scraps with John McCain. He came to Montana and campaigned against me, but in the end, I respected John McCain, and I respected him even when he came to Montana. I was going, "Why the hell are you doing this, John?" To myself. But the truth is that John McCain actually had values and stood up for what he believed in, and we need more of that kind of stuff. People on both sides, yeah, should take a look at that and say, this is what we should be doing." He set a decent example, and we always thought that truthfully, him and Lindsey were very, very tight. Lindsey Graham, and we always thought that Lindsey kept him sane. I think it was the other way around by the actions that we've seen
Mm,
John McCain has passed.
I don't remember him coming to Montana. I have to go back and read my notes.
He came every time I ran, except the first time because he didn't necessarily get along very well with appropriators, and Senator Burns was an appropriator. I was an appropriator too, different rules. But, look, I mean, I don't necessarily think that, um I don't necessarily think he should have, but he did, and I've got my own biased opinion on that, but, in the end, he didn't come and lie about me, he just came and campaigned for the other guy. That's
Campaigned against you, which is politics. Okay, a couple more headlines before our guest joins us here. I wanna bring up this story from Boston. Last week at a naturalization ceremony in Boston, reported that multiple people were actually plucked out of the line as they were standing queued up to take their citizenship oath. So US Citizenship and Immigration Services basically told them, "Hey, no, after all of this, after all the work, you're right here at the end. You're not gonna become a citizen today." They had their oath ceremonies canceled, and the justification here that they've been told is it's because they're from countries that the Trump administration has decided is high risk. And these are people who have been here for many years, legally, done things the right way, and they were taken out at the 11th hour.
To quote, um, to quote a previous president, um, what makes this country great is our immigrants. Um, and I can tell you that for these folks to be plucked out of line uh, during their oath ceremonies after they've jumped through all the hoops, and there's many hoops to jump through, um, I think is really, really unfortunate. And it speaks to the fact that this administration doesn't value immigrants. And that, for that reason, I'm going to tell you that we could well lose our position as the greatest economy and the greatest military in the world. I'm not saying it's immigrants that do all of that, but they certainly contribute to it in a big, big way. And it's just really, really unfortunate that a day of celebration for these folks who have worked hard to be American citizens, because everybody wants that, um, are pulled out because were they wearing masks and brown shirts too? The ICE folks? Um, I don't know. But the truth is, it's really unfortunate. And it speaks to the fact that what has been going on in immigration in this country, and I say this uh, full knowledge, we need to secure the borders. We need to know who's coming across the borders. We knew who these people were. They had come across the border. They had followed the rules. They had gotten in line, and they had gotten to a position where they could have their citizenship. And then it don't matter, because if you're an immigrant, you're bad. I think it's a perspective that we need to get rid of, and Ronald Reagan is rolling in his grave right now.
Mm. That's all we have for headlines, and we are going to pivot right now because our guest has entered the chat, and we will add her here. We want to say welcome to Grounded to former Ambassador Susan Rice, who has worn so many hats in Washington, D.C. I don't even know, there are so many things we could ask you about Ambassador Rice, including, I mean, you were the National Security Advisor, Ambassador to the United Nations, reading, even just like all of the schooling you've done. It's quite an impressive list. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be with you both.
Susan, I just want to say it is truly an honor to have you on the podcast today. You want to talk about somebody who has a breadth of knowledge about a lot of different stuff. The list starts with Susan Rice, and so we want to thank you for being on. We appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you,
And
Senators. Great to
where
be
are
with
you?
you.
Are you somewhere like? Are you in Hawaii where it's the middle of the night, or are you?
No, no, I'm in our great nation's capital.
Cool.
Hey, me too. All
Are
right.
you? All
I
right.
am. I'm here for the week. Okay, so
I hear it's really hot and warm there. How does
oh,
that treat you?
stop.
Not as cold as in Montana, but it's pretty cold here. Yes.
Actually, it's warmer in Montana right now, Susan. I have been
Uh-oh.
complaining about the cold all week, and it's like, "You're hardy, you're from Montana," but no, it's cold this week in DC.
Yeah,
Um,
when it gets cold in DC, it's cold, I'm telling you. I always say when it was 12 degrees when I was there, it was 12 degrees. It's 12 degrees in Montana, that's okay. It's like 20 or 30 below here when it's 12 degrees in DC. I mean, it is flat cold. But anyway, we didn't
well,
get to talk about the weather, okay?
we could talk about the weather. I wanna start just with this. We're gonna hone in on a lot here, but I wanna start kind of with your 30,000-foot view when you look at everything that's happening in your areas of expertise, both domestically, internationally. Is there one thing that keeps you up at night? Is there one thing that you think is more concerning than others?
I wish there was just one thing keeping me up at night, to be honest. Um, I'll talk domestically and internationally. And the biggest thing that's keeping me up at night is what I see is the rapid corrosion of the rule of law in the United States, and the undermining of our democracy, and the move at March pace towards authoritarianism, which is, I believe, Donald Trump's agenda. And internationally, I am deeply, deeply disturbed by a complete contortion of any understanding of what our national interest is. If you look at the new national security strategy that was released at the end of last week, Russia is to be admired and our friend, and no mention of the hostile approach that Russia has long taken to the United States and our Western allies. The Europeans are our adversaries to be vilified and destabilized. In fact, it is now the policy of the United States to work with far-right uh, quasi-Nazi parties in Europe to destabilize our traditional democratic allies. There is a completely transactional view of the threat from China. And now, the Trump administration is going to hand China on a silver platter for nothing in return some of the very most sophisticated chips necessary for AI competition that we possibly could. I don't know what we think we're doing, but it's certainly this is our primary advantage in the AI competition with China, and Trump just blew it out of the water unilaterally in the last couple of days. So we are internationally, Maritsa, in my view, committing what I call superpower suicide. We're shrinking
Mhm.
from a global superpower to a regional power with primary interests only in the Western Hemisphere, plus Canada and Greenland. We have basically said, China, you can do what you want in your sphere of influence. Russia, you can do what you want vis-a-vis Ukraine and Europe in your sphere of influence. It's back to the 19th century. And the unifying theme that brings together what Trump is doing domestically and internationally is, in my view, returning us to the 19th century. 19th century great power competition in spheres of influence where the big powers dominate and control uh, their commercial interests in their sphere, and the 19th century domestically, when a very narrow segment of white Christian male elite oligarchs controlled the economy and subordinated literally everybody else. And that's where we're headed again. So those all of that keeps me up at night. If that's enough.
No, now I can't sleep either. Okay.
Yeah.
S can can I just start? One of the very first things that the Trump administration did, and you touched on it a little bit, was, do away with USAID. It kind of follow along with the America First, uh, stuff that they're talking about. You'd worked with USAID, correct, in a previous job?
Absolutely.
And
Several previous jobs, yes.
so could you talk about I mean, because truth is that, I'm just a farmer in North Central Montana, and, besides shipping a little bit of food, why the hell should I care about USAID that's going to countries in Africa or some other place in the world? Who cares? I mean, who cares about those people? I care about my profitability, and by the way, that's been shot down the sewer with the tariffs, but the truth is, why should I care about that? What did that do for me?
All right. Well, it's a really important question, and I think it gets obscured. First of all, let's understand what USAID did and what it was. USAID for decades was the leading American um, agency that provided humanitarian assistance and support for development for the poorest countries in the world. And it did so at a cost of far less than 1% of the federal budget. And it did so not just out of charity and goodwill. It did so because that advanced our strength and leadership in the world, and I'll explain that. But it also did so because it protected the security and the prosperity of Americans. So it was in our national interest to do so. in the world, as many understand, you know, there is a competition. There was a competition during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. And today there's a competition between the United States and China, and Russia is closely aligned now with China. It's a competition for influence, for support, for allies, for partners, for economic opportunities, for markets, for critical minerals, for resources like oil. And one of the important ways in which the United States uh, i- gained advantage in that competition was helping those who needed help in ways that bound them to the United States. And so, if we're giving food aid to poor people in Ethiopia, we're not just keeping them from starving. We're keeping the people of Ethiopia and the government of Ethiopia uh, more aligned with the United States. But very importantly, also, and this gets to the national interest part, as you know, Senator, American farmers were a principal beneficiary of our foreign assistance. Our food aid, in particular, was purchased from farmers and provided to countries around the world. And that evaporated. And we saw grain rotting in storage facilities in this country. We saw, medicines and supplies that had been purchased by American taxpayers allowed to expire in warehouses around the world because this administration would rather, uh, you know, see goods go to waste than help people in need. And you heard it again just recently. The president vilifies countries that are in the developing world, calling them shithole countries, and saying, he doesn't care about those people. And in fact, he wants to cleanse the United States of anybody who may have gained citizenship in the United States, having come however many generations ago from those countries. So the USAID did so many things. It was a principal provider of life-saving humanitarian assistance, medical support, agricultural support, education, you name it. It also helped to support and advance our interests and values in democracy, helping civil society, helping freedom of the press, doing the sort of work that gave uh, peoples around the world the wherewithal to express their views, to stand up for their civil and human rights. And it also did important things like helping countries develop the ability to detect, test for, and contain disease outbreaks. So you may remember some years ago, we were in the United States freaking out about the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. We were rightly concerned that Ebola could reach the United States by somebody getting on a plane in West Africa and landing in the United States and coming in with a horrible disease that you can only detect through, screening for fever and blood that that can have a devastating impact. USAID and the CDC and the US agencies that were engaged in development have built up around the world a global health security infrastructure so that countries can see, oh my goodness, we have an Ebola outbreak now. Let's isolate it, let's contain it. And now actually we have a vaccine that can help uh, mitigate the spread of something like Ebola. All of that done through the resources and investments of organizations, including USAID. So when we pull out and cut off those funds and eliminate the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is gone, dead, evaporated now, we are leaving ourselves vulnerable because we won't be able to help countries detect and contain diseases, including epidemics and pandemics, before they reach our shores. So those are just some of the ways in which this is self-defeating. And last thing I'll say is it has just left the playing field wide open to China to come in and steal our influence and expand theirs and squeeze us out of Latin America, of Africa, of parts of Asia and the Middle East, where frankly we have interests and we have reasons to be present. The Chinese get it. That's why they're there. And they are licking their chops and dancing like it's Christmas every day when the United States retreats. And that's why I say it's superpower suicide.
Well, it drives me crazy that the president will stand up and talk about China and how we got to hold them accountable with tariffs, and then turn around and give them the ability to have influence in the world. And you know better than anybody, our biggest asset in this country was our allies. And push our allies away, push away people away. I don't know if China's got a base on the west coast of Africa. I know they've been working on it for years and years and years. That hadn't been successful. I don't know if they're working on one. That would not surprise me if they weren't. And if you want to talk about national security and USAID and influence and all that, that's where all this stuff is headed, folks. We're headed to a third world status while China's going to be the king of the world in a communistic government. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I wanted to just mention too, there is a new documentary out, and it's saying that the shutdown of USAID has already killed hundreds of thousands of people. So these are headlines to watch. Should we move on, Senator? You want to talk about Ukraine and Russia? What do you want to talk about next?
I can look if you want to go, or I can go, whatever you want to do. I mean, Susan Rice being on the show, we can just about go anywhere we want. But if
Uh,
you don't mind, I could do this.
well, you go ahead. What's your next question? You want to talk about
No, I
boat
mean,
strikes? What
look,
do you want to talk about?
we'll touch back on USAID when we close this program out. But the truth is that a few years back we watched Russia uh, walk into a country um, like Ukraine for no reason other than the fact that they want to reunite the USSR. We have seen many folks, not all, but many, and maybe a majority on the Republican side of the aisle, say that we don't want to make we don't. It's not our fight, so what the hell? Let Putin do whatever he wants. We've seen the president offer up a peace deal that, quite frankly, I think Putin wrote. Um, so tell me, just kind of from your perspective, why should we give a shit about Ukraine? Kind of like the same question I asked you on USAID. Why should we care about Ukraine? I mean,
Okay,
why?
great. That's a really fundamental and important question. And to answer it, I need to do a quick, you know, short history lesson. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Putin, who is everybody should recall is a former KGB agent, has felt like Russia's, great historical standing, its pride, its power has been diminished. And he has made it his project, as you said, Senator, to, restore the Soviet Union, basically to try to take Russia back to its czarist era greatness when it was a big global empire and it held great influence in the world and particularly in Europe. So in 2007, when President George W. Bush was in the White House, Russia invaded Georgia, neighboring state of Georgia, one of the former Soviet states. And through 2007, 2008, it gained a physical foothold in Georgia, and it has continued to occupy Georgia, parts of Georgia since that time. In 2014, under President Obama, when I was National Security Advisor, Russia invaded Crimea and the eastern part of Ukraine, and has held Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine uh, i- since. In 2022, Russia tried to take all of Ukraine and tried to seize Kyiv and the entirety of Ukraine. And to many people's surprise, the people of Ukraine fought valiantly with really with nothing to start with to try to push back the Russians and liberate as much of their territory as they can. And as we know, the war is ground on in the East ever since. If we don't support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government as it tries to fight Russia and turn back yet another aggressive invasion of a sovereign country, we need to recognize where Putin is going with this. He's got eyes on Moldova. He's got eyes on the Baltic states. He's got eyes on NATO territory. And in fact, as we speak, there's reason to believe that Russia is already launching sort of stealthy air and sea incursions with drones and underwater vehicles into NATO waters and airspace. The reality is, if we do not help Ukraine stop Russia in its tracks in Ukraine, we are going to see yet another Russian attempt to do more and more and more. And sooner or later, it is going to force the United States and Western countries in NATO to have to confront a Russian aggression. So unless we want American boys and girls fighting to defend ourselves, our interests, and our allies in NATO, we need to help the Ukrainians stop the Russians now. And
Susan,
that's as simple as I can put it.
I I I agree with you 100%. I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here for a second. When I was 10 or 11 years old, I remember my folks being in my uncle and aunt's house in Billings, Montana. And I remember them talking about the fact that if we didn't stop the communists in Vietnam, they were gonna be on our shores. You probably you
I'm old enough to remember that. I'm like,
remember that?
man,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, but you didn't have to admit to it because you don't look that old, right? So,
No, that's true.
but I remember him having a conversation, I was just a little kid, but I remember that, and and so the question is, what's the difference with what you just explained and that philosophy back during the Vietnam War? Because, by the way, you know this better than anybody, one of our greatest allies in Southeast Asia right now is Vietnam. Um, I don't
Partners.
know
I use
what
the term ally very carefully. Ally means
partners,
treaty ally. And that's
partners.
Mm,
what yes, but that's what gets that distinction is important because it gets to the answer to your question.
Yes.
Since the creation of NATO decades ago, we have benefited. The United States has benefited from having partners in Europe and in Canada that have committed to stand with us against the threat from the former Soviet Union, now Russia, or any other threat. And the only time NATO has ever been asked to invoke Article 5, which is an attack on one is an attack on all, and will come to the defense of one country attacked by a non-NATO member, was after 9/11, when Al Qaeda attacked the United States and we had to go to war in Afghanistan, and NATO stood with us, and our partners were with us, and we needed their support. Now, we don't. Uh, so that's the first thing. Secondly, Ukraine is not far away from our shores and our interests. It is on the border of NATO. It is an aspiring country to join NATO. And if Russia is in Ukraine, it is on NATO's doorstep in an aggressive posture. And in fact, it's on NATO's doorstep in the Baltics in an aggressive posture. And we need to be concerned that the next potential victim could be somewhere, from the Baltics to Poland. This is directly affecting our security and what has underpinned our security since the end of World War II. And now we see Russia partnering in so many ways with China. And China, of course, is not just an economic competitor for the United States, it's a strategic competitor. China wants not just to, control Taiwan, they want to control the whole of the Asia Pacific and, in fact, parts of Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. And if we let Russia and China go about their business to try to dominate and squeeze us out of markets, out of minerals, and out of our longstanding strategic foothold in each of those regions, then we will be weaker and far more at risk. And so that's what's at stake. And here's what Trump's answer to this is. Trump's answer is, I don't give a damn. Let Russia do what it wants to do. Let China do what it wants to do. All we need to care about is the Western Hemisphere. Well, no, it's not all we need to care about, because we are a global player. We are a global economy. We are a global superpower. And unless we want China dictating the terms of trade, unless we want China and its AI chips and its AI infrastructure dominating the world and squeezing us out and teaching, kids in the United States Xi Jinping thought, we better take this threat seriously. And we better recognize that our strength is inextricably linked to having strong allies and partners in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere in the world. And Trump's view is, we don't need friends. We don't need allies. We just need to go back to the 19th century, where we have our sphere of influence and China has its and Russia has its. Uh, and, we'll just satisfy ourselves with a diminished pie, so long as we are benefiting this elite tech brother oligarch network of rich donors that have hijacked his administration and that are on their project to subordinate everybody other than their elite white Christian nationalist selves.
It would be great if the president maybe had a clue about what history has done and what the history of the country is, and what happened in World War II.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, in order to get out of this mess that we're headed down, this circle down the sewer, it's probably going to cost American lives.
No, I
Susan,
think it will.
I want to
Sadly.
ask you kind of two parts here. The first, and I know we always have more questions than we have time, but the first is, if you can go back to what was going on in meetings in 2014 when you were national security advisor, when Russia invaded Crimea, was the threat of where we are today with the situation in the conversations, was it part of the calculus? Was this a concern back then in 2014? And my other question, and this is really a culmination of your questions, why aren't we seeing more reaction or GOP leaders, both past and present, speaking out about the issues that you just raised?
That second question is maybe better put to the senator. But let me talk about 2014 and the Russian invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Look, that was a pretty early instance of what we've come to call hybrid warfare, where the Russians sort of stealthily went in to Crimea and then clearly subsequently exerted military control over the territory. And our response with our partners in Europe and our partners in Ukraine, um, I believe in retrospect, was inadequate. We provided some military assistance, defensive military assistance. We gave our European partners, who were very keen, particularly in Germany and France, our support to engage in negotiations with Russia, trying to limit Russia's advances and um, get Russia to pull back. Those negotiations didn't ultimately yield. What they yielded some agreements, but Russia violated the agreements. And what was essentially the result was kind of a frozen conflict, a line of control in eastern Ukraine that Russia obviously wasn't satisfied with, but obviously Ukraine wasn't satisfied with. But it was sort of a frozen conflict until 2022. And I think in retrospect, when you look back at Georgia in 2007 and 8, when you look back at Crimea and eastern Ukraine in 2014, we did not do enough to stop Putin. And that's why I believe, and I wasn't, on President Biden's national security team. I was doing domestic policy, but that's why in 2022 you saw a much more robust United States and European response, recognizing that this pattern cannot continue, and that if we allow it to, it will, Putin will remain on a march westward into NATO territory in Europe. And so we then mustered a much more robust response of providing military and economic support to Ukraine. And, Ukraine has done an extraordinary job and made enormous sacrifices. And by the way, contrary to what President Trump likes to say, it's the Europeans who have provided the most in the way of military and economic support to Ukraine. But the United States has played a very important role up until this year when Trump came into office and has not provided a dime, not a dime, directly to Ukraine economically, or in the form of military support. But we have enabled Ukraine to do what many people thought was impossible, which was to push Russia back and stand up. And now they're in a brutal, grinding conflict. But Ukraine has largely maintained its sovereignty. And that is all at risk if the United States continues to pull back and offer, and jam down Ukraine's throat, peace deals, which, as you said, Senator, were written in Moscow.
Yep.
It's not only a shame and an embarrassment how the United States is treating Ukraine under President Trump. It's a strategic blunder, and it's going to cost us. And one can only hope, although there's less and less reason for hope, that the Trump administration will see that Putin is playing Trump like a fiddle. He's manipulating him. He's using him, and that this division that we are now stoking with our European allies and Ukraine is detrimental to our national interest. But you see, as I was trying to say earlier, it's really not about our national interest when it comes to Trump. It's about his 19th century view of how strong men and great powers ought to comport themselves, and it's about profit. I mean, littered throughout all of this is Trump and his allies and cronies and family members enriching themselves on the backs of our national security.
Yep, and see, it goes all over the place. See, $20 billion to Argentina. That was nothing about anything but making their investors happy. $20 billion, I might add. We're talking about 12 billion to farmers. This was 20 billion. Just cut them a check, and some say it was
Actually, 40. Yeah,
40
Yeah.
just cut them a check. And I couldn't.
While Argentina sells its soybeans to China.
Exactly right. Well, they undercut our own farmers in this country, yet he stands up and says, "Oh, I love the farmers." Bullshit. Look what you've done to them. You've driven them to poverty. There's gonna be a lot of farmers go broke this week. Those checks coming out to agriculture aren't gonna be big enough. But I will say this, you are exactly 100% correct. And then the question becomes, where does Russia stop? Do they stop? Does he
That's the
stop
line.
with you in the old USSR, or does he keep going? Does he keep going into France and Italy like Hitler did? The question is where does he stop? And I don't think he
He
stops.
doesn't stop until he is stopped.
That's
And
correct.
that's when the economic and military costs to Russia make it so that it is not worth his while to continue this march. And that's why, the sanctions need to be ratcheted up on Russia. The military aid needs to flow to Ukraine unfettered, including Tomahawk missiles. The assets that have been frozen in Europe need to be released, the Russian assets, and at least allowed to benefit Ukraine. I mean,
Yep.
that's the way you change Putin's calculus. And instead, what Trump is doing, and just as he's doing with Xi Jinping, is saying, here, have whatever you want for free, and we're not asking anything in return. It's insane.
Well, he might be asking for something in return. He might be getting a casino.
Personally,
Yeah.
correct.
I do want to ask you, Susan, about this story that continues to grow legs. We're seeing more headlines about it all the time, aside, of course, from Epstein. The probe into these strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. We've seen some congressional Republicans, Rand Paul specifically, Senator Rand Paul has been pretty vocal about this, kind of start to distance themselves from the president on some of these. Yesterday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had a closed-door briefing with leaders, wouldn't commit to showing every member of Congress the videos of that September 2nd double tap strike that we're hearing so much about. And now the president is not ruling out putting troops on the ground in Venezuela. So I'm just kind of wondering if we could unpack that a little bit with you before you have to go, and kind of what we should all be considering when we follow this story.
Well, the first thing we should be asking ourselves is why has Trump deployed 15,000 U.S. military men and women to the theater around Venezuela? Why has he taken our most sophisticated and complex carrier fighter group and moved it out of the Mediterranean, uh, away from concerns in the Middle East, in Russia? Why is he moving assets uh, of that caliber into the region? He says it's because of drugs. Well, let's be clear. The drugs that come into the United States and the fentanyl that is poisoning Americans is obviously a very serious threat and concern. You got to deal with it on the supply side and the demand side. You hear nothing about the demand side from this administration. But let's just talk about the supply side. The fentanyl coming into the United States is coming from Mexico via precursor chemicals coming from China. All right. There is nothing about the deployment in the vicinity around Venezuela that is doing a thing about the fentanyl crisis. Not a thing. What drugs come from South America? Cocaine, largely from Colombia, that transships in some instances, moves through Venezuela. And when it moves through Venezuela, guess where it's mostly going? Europe and Africa. It's not mostly coming to the United States. Some portion of it perhaps is, but not the bulk of it. So we're talking about not fentanyl, but cocaine, not largely destined for the United States, but for Europe. And yet we're bombing boats, killing people without knowing who they are, without knowing what's in the boats, without knowing where the boats are going. And it's called murder. It's not a war. The laws of war actually shouldn't apply here. We can debate the legality of the second strike, but the whole enterprise is illegal. The whole enterprise is extrajudicial killing. The way you deal with drug traffickers and people who violate the law is by boarding their boats and seizing the cargo, seizing the people who are on those boats and putting them through a legal process. That is not what this is. This is cold. It's like walking down the street. Remember when Trump said, I can walk down the streets of New York and shoot anybody and get away with it? That's what this is on the high seas. It's just cold-blooded murder and extrajudicial killings. And it's not making Americans safer. And by the way, if it's not about drugs, then what is it? Maybe it's about regime change in Venezuela. That's been Marco Rubio's fantasy for many, many years. So maybe that's what it's about. But, if we get to bombing Venezuela and we're still, God forbid, putting U.S. troops on the ground in Venezuela, for what? To what end? From a president who claimed to be, the anti-war, anti-interventionist president. I think this is about trying to scare Maduro out of power or force Maduro out of power, which is not a U.S. government or U.S. national interest priority. It may be the priority of us, of a subset of people who hate Maduro, which nobody has any time for Maduro. I certainly don't. But do I want to see U.S. lives and treasure devoted to forcing him out of power? at the expense of taking our eye off the ball in China and Russia? No.
100%. This also has the added impact of taking people's attention off of the Epstein files, I might add. So,
Yeah. And I think, Senator, potentially to create a pretext to say the United States is at war and if need be, declare a state of emergency that can be utilized to clamp down on domestic dissent and even thwart potentially domestic elections if they think that that every other game that they've played and every other trick they've tried to pull out of a hat doesn't work because they know their policies are unpopular. They know they're unpopular, and that it's looking like, at least from a distance, an electoral bloodbath for them next year.
Susan, I know our time is running out, so a couple easy questions.
I got a little time
Um,
to go for it.
okay. Do you we've had a lot of people on our podcast who have been named 2028 contenders. Could we put you in that category if people are asking, would Susan Rice want to run for president?
Uh, I'm really not giving that a great deal of serious thought. Once in a while, somebody suggests that, and look, I've loved serving both the national security capacities and domestic capacities. If you want to start a draft movement, let me know. Uh,
that's, really a good answer because most of the
Good
time we
answer.
get people on, they say, "No, there's no way I'd ever do that," and you know damn well they're gonna do it. But you actually said, "I haven't thought about it yet, and if you wanna start a draft movement, let me know." Hey, I'm in.
I
I'm
I
in.
like it. I like it. Okay, and then I didn't know this. Senator will love this. Ambassador Rice was a member of the Oxford University women's basketball team. Do you still play hoops?
No. Um, but yes, I did. I played hoop. Let me know. Wait. This is a great topic. I played hoops in high school, not particularly well. And then I went to college and could not begin to play Division I basketball. I went to Oxford, where in the late 1980s, it would not be an exaggeration to say that women's basketball had not uh, reached its prime. So I was able to play on the Oxford team, which was great fun. And I love basketball. I love sports. I still do play tennis quite a bit. But
Oh.
here's the real story about basketball in my family. My niece is somebody named Kiki Rice, who is one of the leading point guards in the country. She plays for UCLA, and she is a real baller. So there are Rices with legit claims to being serious basketball players. I'm just not one of them here.
Kiki Rice, we're gonna
Yeah, look
follow
up
her and
Kiki
cheer her
Rice.
on.
She
Oh,
is
hell, I'm
she's
bringing it up.
awesome.
I'm gonna watch UCLA now. I
And
mean,
don't sleep on UCLA. We're going back to the Final Four, and we're gonna win it this time.
I
My
love it.
last question, and I'll let Senator close us out. But you've talked about so much. You talked about plenty that keeps you up at night. So many people share that sentiment right now. No matter where you fall, no matter where you live, there's a lot going on. Um, how do you relax knowing everything that you know? Like, what's your advice to the rest of us?
Well, you take care of what you can take care of, which is not to say you don't worry about the larger picture, but it's, first of all, take care of yourself, your health. Try to get as much sleep as you can. Try to exercise as you can. Take care of the people around you that you love, your family, your friends, your community. And be involved and engaged in trying to make life better for those closest to you. But then I would add another thing. Look, we are in a serious moment, as we've discussed in this country. Our many people's livelihoods are at risk. People can't afford to buy their health insurance anymore. They can't afford to keep their small businesses going. They can't afford the price of food and electricity and housing. This is a very serious moment. And meanwhile, we've got, a president of the United States who is trying to strip our rights and freedoms away and take us back to a time when the most of us didn't have a voice and any power in this country. And so that demands that all of us, recognize what's at stake. And to the extent that we are tired or too comfortable, or complacent or think it doesn't affect me, it's just, some immigrant over, across town, we need to wake up and we need to take this moment seriously. And so, I relax in all the ways that normal people do with, family and friends and, uh you know, I like to smash a tennis ball as a way of getting out my aggression. But at the end of the day, I'm also, here to say to anybody who will listen, we've gotta rise to this moment. And to me, that means being engaged, in mass, peaceful, nonviolent protest. And not, every 3 months on a Saturday, but in a sustained, regular way in all of our communities around the country. If you study how democracy dies and how democracy, when under duress, can be resilient, what it often comes down to is whether sufficient n numbers of people are willing to come together and peacefully oppose, what is happening in their countries, and that's what we need to do now in a sustained way, and we need to speak out. You've got too many cowards, too many capitulators, too many people who are fearful or intimidated. They're coming for all kinds of people who oppose them, and I'm well aware that I'm one of them. But I'm not gonna shut up. I'm not gonna be intimidated, and that's the kind of we all have to do what we can in our respective, um, communities to stand up and find energy and sustenance in each other. Because at the end of the day, as the senator knows, this shit that Trump is doing is not popular. It really isn't. It's not. The economic policies aren't popular. The craziness you were talking about on immigration, it's one thing to talk about the border, and we need to secure the border. It's another thing to be ripping Americans, citizens out of their cars and banging their heads on the pavement and locking them away and not allow them to talk to their lawyers, and their families. Americans do not want to be told that they can't say what they think, or that a comedian can't, crack a joke that condemns the president. That's not who we are. And this stuff is increasingly unpopular. And we need to make that known and make it felt in ways that can change the trajectory that we're on.
Well, I think people are feeling it, and I can tell you that if you take a look at the election a month ago, the one a week, 10 days ago, the one in Miami, people are making their voices be heard. The the challenge out there is Trump's doing exactly what he said he was gonna do. Congress needs to get off their ass and go to work because they have a job to do, and they are totally, totally AWOL. And if you were in the military and you were AWOL, you'd be punished for that. And they'll get
Correct.
in the elections if we have an election because they haven't done jack shit about the problems that are out there. And it drives me insane because I know these people and they're not bad people, but they absolutely are incredibly trembling in their boots every time that Trump comes around. And I think it's an incredible mistake. This is, you want to be on the right side of history here, and they're not on the right side of history. We're seeing some signs that they're going to starting to grow a backbone, but man, they got a long ways to go. Long ways
They
to go.
do. And I mean, you would know because you made a different choice. What is the point of serving?
There
What is
is
the point of being elected if you don't wanna do the job you came for? If you just wanna stay there and be a weenie?
there is none
Point.
unless your ego is such that you want people kissing your ass, because there's a lot of that that goes on. But the fact is, other than that, there is none. There's none. None. And I'm not wired like you normal politicians. I get that. But the truth is I get I like people treating me straight up, whether I'm a senator, whether I'm a farmer, or whether I'm a member of the school board. It doesn't matter. I like people telling me straight up. A lot of these people like to be put on the throne. And Trump, by the way, is the king of that kind of crap. He likes to really be put on the throne. See what he's done with, getting into the parks free, doing away with MLK and Juneteenth and putting his
We didn't even talk about that.
picture on a coin and all this shit. That's all about his own damn ego. Should I care about that? I don't really give a shit. But the truth is I really do care about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and what's going on in our economy right now and how our military has been undermined, and the list goes on and on. That's why we thank you for being on the show today. Thanks, Susan Rice. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much to both of you. It's been really great.
And
Yeah,
I wanna
Thanks.
do a really quick shout out to your mom, who helped design the Pell Grant program, which
Thank
I
you.
couldn't have gone to college without. So thank you so
Thank
much to
you.
her too. Thank
I'm
you.
proud. Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
thank you, Ambassador Rice.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
bye.
Okay, so we'll wrap up here. Wow, we covered a lot, and yet we did it. Like, there was so much we could talk about, and I know you have another meeting to
I
get
do.
to also. I did wanna ask you, though, because a lot of people have asked us, well, through our channel, "Hey, I wanna hear what Senator Tester thinks about this $12 billion farmer bailout." So, briefly, tell us that. You were on Chris Hayes last night on
Yeah.
MS Now and
Yep.
talked about it there?
Couple things. First of all, this was like the arsonist setting your house on fire and then driving up with a fire truck saying, "How can I help?" This problem was caused by this administration's bad policy on trade, the tariffs in particular, that's dropped the prices at the farm gate and increased input costs, making farming pretty tough business to make a living in. But the same thing could be said for Main Street businesses. The same thing could be said for working families. The same thing could be said for America in general. The 12 billion, there's a lot of folks that check's not going to be big enough. They're still going broke. And it's not because of disease or drought or bugs. It's because of really, really shitty policy from an administration that doesn't have a clue what the hell's going on in rural America. And I say that absolutely unequivocally without any reservations whatsoever. You can have Bissett get on TV and say, well, I'm a property owner and all that shit. He doesn't know. He's never picked up a wrench and changed a set of duck foot shovel. We'll just tell you that. He's never picked a bale of hay and put it up in the barn and did it day after day after day after day in 100-degree heat. I'm telling you what, farmers work hard just like everybody else in this country works hard, and a $12 billion Band-Aid ain't going to do it. He gave $20 billion to Argentina, $40 billion, I mean, to Argentina so they could undercut our own markets, and this is going to be the Band-Aid that he puts on to try to get their vote, the same thing he did in the first administration. I'm pissed because our markets should be giving us a check, not the American taxpayer, and not put more debt on our kids. That's it.
That's it. I'm pissed. That's it. Okay. Thank you for that. We want to tease what's ahead. So tomorrow we're going to be here live. We're going to do kind of a mini episode with Juliet Jetski of Decoding Fox News. So we're excited for that conversation. And then next week, folks, we have former U.S. ambassador to Russia and Montana native Michael McFaul to talk about his book, Autocrats versus Democrats, China, Russia, America, and the New Global Disorder. We talked to him, earlier this year. When was that? March? And so we're excited to have him back. We'll talk a little bit about international policy and I'm sure Montana as well. Anything I'm missing before we get to your hat?
You got it all, man. This is just a red hat that I wore that says something about
A
going
red
to the
hat with white
highway,
letters.
going to the Sun Highway in a rally.
Going to the Sun rally.
Yeah.
Going to the Sun Road is in Glacier Park. What's the Going to the Sun rally? Is that a motorcycle rally?
It's a car rally. So,
Oh,
hey,
car.
yeah, it's all good.
Car rally.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you have any reason for wearing that today? You just picked your red
I
hat
just
up and
it's one of the 50 that I got laying out, so it's all good.
Okay. Wow, we have a lot of people to thank. First of all, you can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email at groundedpcast@gmail.com. We are so grateful for this community who joins us for these episodes. We couldn't do it without you, of course. We want to thank our guest, former Ambassador Susan Rice, who's just a wealth of knowledge about everything. If you go look at everything she has studied in her academic career and then the things and the jobs and the titles she went on to hold. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And we want to thank our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music and to all of you, our listeners and viewers.
All right. Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.